Right now, millions are silently bleeding out in an invisible war, and society is handing them motivational quotes instead of a tourniquet. We are literally shaming people to death. Before you ever tell someone to choose happiness again, you must hear this terrifying biological truth. Imagine, for a second, lying on the cold pavement, your bones shattered, your flesh torn open, bleeding out while gasping for a single breath of air. Now, imagine a loved one walking up to you, looking down at your mangled body, rolling their eyes, and casually whispering, "You know, you're just being lazy. Have you tried smiling? Just get up and walk it off." It sounds like a scene pulled straight from a twisted psychological horror movie, doesn't it? You would call that person a monster. You would be sickened by their profound lack of empathy. Yet, this exact brand of merciless butchery happens thousands of times a day, inside our homes, our offices, and our inner circles. It doesn't leave pools of blood on the floor, and it doesn't show up on an X-ray. It is an invisible slaughter, slowly suffocating millions of people while the rest of the world watches, judges, and spits out toxic platitudes. The Wealth Ladder 6 welcomes you, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we are not talking about hustle culture, profit margins, or the superficial illusion of financial success. Today, we are stepping straight into the abyss. If you are ready to strip away the societal masks and face the brutal, unspoken realities of the human mind, please hit that subscribe button right now. Your support is the engine that drives this channel to keep exposing the truths no one else dares to touch. I am not standing here today as some detached professor in a tailored suit, smelling of expensive cologne, preaching from an ivory tower of academic theory. No, I am speaking to you as someone who has been locked inside that suffocating, pitch-black room. I have watched people I love, my own blood, my closest brothers, slowly drown in a psychological black hole. I have stood there utterly paralyzed, watching the very life force drain from their eyes, witnessing their desperate will to live teeter on the absolute edge of existence, while feeling entirely powerless to stop it. So today, I am taking a blinding flashlight and aiming it straight at the filthiest, most ignored corners of societal apathy. I am here to violently rip the mask off the prejudices that are quietly killing sick people every single day. Close your eyes and try to genuinely comprehend this nightmare. You wake up one morning, but the vibrant, breathing world you knew yesterday has been violently drained of all its color. Everything is coated in an ash-gray, sickeningly cold fog that makes your spine shiver. You desperately want to get out of bed, you want to go to work, you want to participate in life. But the mere act of pushing a razor-thin bedsheet off your chest demands a monumental, bone-crushing amount of energy, as if you were trying to deadlift a 10-ton shipping container. Your limbs are entirely made of lead. Your brain is frozen in a block of ice. An echoing, hollow emptiness completely devours your chest, eating you alive from the inside out. And then, right in the middle of that silent agony, while you are violently fighting just to keep your lungs expanding for one more agonizing breath, someone casually strolls in. It could be a coworker, a lifelong friend, or, most devastatingly, the parent who raised you. They look at your paralyzed state, let out a condescending sigh, and drop a feather-light sentence that hits like a sledgehammer. You're just making excuses. Go outside, get some fresh air, and stop being so lazy. In that exact split second, the sheer cruelty of those words steals whatever oxygen you had left. It is a bitter, suffocating kind of ruthlessness. It is exactly like thrashing wildly in the middle of a freezing ocean, choking on salt water, begging for a lifeline, only for a passing yacht to toss you a concrete cinder block while shouting, "Swim harder." You're drowning because you just don't have the right mindset. My objective here is crystal clear and utterly unapologetic. I want to completely obliterate the shallow, lip-service culture and the sickening indifference of a society that aggressively claims the right to judge another human being's unseen agony. I am here to fiercely validate anyone out there who is silently enduring the hell of mental illness. Your pain is absolutely real. It is brutal, it is savage, and it is in no way a cry for attention or an act of theatrical weakness. Mental illness is an invisible, bloody battle for survival. It is a war zone where the victim is bleeding out their last drop of mental sanity just to avoid dying right there on their own mattress. Do not let any arrogant, smooth-talking bystander brainwash you into believing that mental agony is just a bad mood or a lack of mental fortitude. It is a legitimate, terrifying, catastrophic failure of your biological machinery. Those who wake up every day and fight this invisible beast are genuine warriors. They deserve profound respect and unwavering solidarity, not to be used as target practice for cheap, ignorant, and profoundly cruel words of comfort. That invisible beast, the one society so arrogantly dismisses as a mere phase, is not a phantom woven from a weak spirit. It is a very tangible, catastrophic rebellion of your own biology. We live in a world that universally understands and respects the failure of physical organs, yet remains willfully blind to the failure of the most complex organ of all. If a man collapses because his pancreas stops producing insulin, we rush him to the hospital, we administer medication, and we recognize his suffering as a legitimate medical emergency. We do not stand over his trembling body and tell him to just produce more insulin. We do not tell a cancer patient that their tumors are simply the result of a negative attitude. Yet, when the human brain, an incredibly delicate, electrical meat computer suspended in chemicals, misfires, we suddenly abandon all scientific logic. We replace empathy with judgment, and we replace medicine with shallow motivational quotes. This is the great lie of the modern wellness industry, a lie that has been aggressively packaged and sold to us by internet gurus and self-proclaimed life coaches. They have monetized the dangerous illusion that you can simply meditate, journal, or positive think your way out of a severe chemical imbalance. They peddle the toxic narrative that happiness is always a choice, which mathematically implies that if you are depressed, anxious, or suicidal, you are actively choosing to be miserable. It is a brilliant marketing strategy for selling books and seminars, but it is a profoundly destructive philosophy for a human being who cannot even summon the neurotransmitters required to feel basic hunger, let alone joy. I need you to understand the absolute violence of telling a clinically depressed person to just change their mindset. When the serotonin and dopamine receptors in your brain have effectively shut down, joy is not a choice. It is a biological impossibility. The gray fog I mentioned earlier is not a metaphor. It is a literal perceptual shift caused by a brain that is starving for its own vital chemicals. Imagine trying to start a car with no gasoline in the tank, and the passengers in the back seat are screaming at you, calling you worthless, lazy, and pathetic because the engine will not turn over. That is what it feels like to live with a mental illness in a society that refuses to acknowledge the brain as an organ susceptible to disease. The shame that this creates is heavier than the illness itself. The sufferer begins to internalize the ignorance of the crowd. They look in the mirror, see the hollow circles under their eyes, and they believe the lie. They convince themselves that they are broken by their own doing, that they are a burden, that they are inherently flawed in character rather than afflicted by a biological storm. We are literally shaming people to death because we are too intellectually lazy to understand the chemistry of human suffering. It is time we stop treating mental health as a mystical issue of willpower and start treating it with the exact same gravity, science, and desperate urgency as a bleeding artery. When your own biology turns against you in this silent civil war, the collateral damage inevitably bleeds into the lives of everyone who tries to get close to you. Mental illness does not just eat the host, it actively starves the relationships surrounding them, creating an agonizing paradox where the person who most desperately needs human connection is the one compelled to violently push it away. I have seen this tragedy unfold with my own eyes, watching families shatter and lifelong friendships dissolve into awkward, painful silences. It is a slow-motion car crash of misunderstandings, where love is rarely enough to bridge the massive chasm created by a sick mind. The isolation of mental illness is not a peaceful solitude. It is a solitary confinement cell lined with mirrors, where you are forced to watch your own deterioration while feeling completely disconnected from the human race. You can be sitting in a crowded living room, surrounded by people who would willingly take a bullet for you, and still feel like you are screaming from the bottom of an abandoned well. Your loved ones see you sitting there, physically present, but they can sense the vast, cold distance in your eyes. They try to reach out. They ask what is wrong. And this is where the tragedy compounds itself. Because how do you explain to someone you love that the mere sound of their voice feels like sandpaper on your raw, Exhausted nerves? How do you articulate that you do not want to die, but you physically cannot endure the agonizing friction of being alive? Out of a desperate desire to protect their loved ones from this darkness, the sufferer begins to lie. They paste on a fragile, plastic smile. They say they are just tired. They systematically withdraw, canceling plans, ignoring calls, retreating further into the pitch-black room because the performance of pretending to be okay requires more energy than they have in their entire body. And the people on the outside? They get frustrated. They feel rejected. The human ego naturally assumes that this withdrawal is personal. A mother feels she has failed. A spouse feels unloved. A friend feels cast aside. The very people trying to throw a lifeline eventually grow exhausted, their empathy curdling into resentment. They start offering unsolicited advice, trying to aggressively fix a problem they do not understand, which only drives the wedge deeper. The sufferer feels misunderstood and interrogated, while the loved one feels helpless and angry. It is a heartbreaking dance of two people desperately trying to reach each other across a terrifying void, only to end up hurting each other more. The silence that eventually settles between them is not peaceful. It is heavy with unsaid apologies and quiet grief. The invisible darkness does not just claim the mind of the afflicted. It slowly suffocates the bonds of love, leaving everyone involved standing in the wreckage, wondering how they lost someone who is still physically standing right in front of them. This unbearable isolation is only magnified by a hyper-capitalist machine that measures our human worth exclusively by our relentless capacity to produce. Welcome back to the core philosophy of the Wealth Ladder 6, where we usually discuss the mechanics of climbing to the top, but today, we must fiercely condemn the blood on the rungs of that very ladder. We have constructed a society that operates like a ruthless assembly line, a world where your value as a human being is inextricably tied to your output, your daily grind, and your visible achievements. Hustle culture has become our modern religion, and in this ruthless theology, exhaustion is worn as a badge of honor, while resting, especially resting to heal an invisible wound, is branded as a mortal sin. When you are fighting a daily, bloody war inside your own head just to survive until dinner time, the societal demand to crush your goals and maximize your potential feels like a cruel, twisted joke. You are standing on the battlefield, holding your own psychological intestines in your hands, and society is tapping its watch, asking why your quarterly spreadsheet isn't finished yet. The modern corporate landscape and the entrepreneurial echo chamber have entirely weaponized productivity, turning it into a blunt instrument used to beat the sick into submission. We are told that if we just wake up at 4 a.m., take ice baths, and grind harder, we will conquer all our demons. This toxic ideology creates a devastating secondary layer of trauma for anyone battling mental illness. Not only are they fighting a terrifying biological breakdown, but they are also crushed by the overwhelming guilt of their own perceived uselessness. They watch their peers climbing the ranks, buying houses, posting their curated, filtered successes online, while they are expending all their earthly energy just trying to convince themselves to take a shower. In a system that equates financial and professional output with moral goodness, the mentally ill are systematically categorized as defective cogs in the machine. They are made to feel that because they cannot continuously produce, they simply do not deserve to consume oxygen. I am here to violently reject that premise. Your worth is not determined by your profit margin, your job title, or your ability to function flawlessly within a system designed to extract your labor until you die. The fact that a sick person can manage to stand up, face a world that feels completely devoid of light, and somehow drag themselves through the agonizing hours of a work day is a testament to a level of grit and endurance that most healthy CEOs could never even fathom. The corporate ladder looks down on the depressed, the anxious, and the neurodivergent as liabilities, but the truth is, surviving the crushing weight of a mind trying to destroy itself requires a staggering, monumental strength that cannot be quantified on any balance sheet. We must completely sever the tether between human dignity and economic output if we ever hope to stop the bleeding. To dismantle this soul-crushing machine, we must fundamentally rewrite the entire societal vocabulary we use to define strength, success, and human connection. We need a radical, uncompromising shift in how we approach the invisible agony of others, moving away from a culture of shallow correction to a culture of profound, unconditional presence. If you want to truly save a life, if you want to pull someone back from the ledge of that suffocating black hole, you have to completely abandon your desperate need to fix them. You cannot aggressively life coach someone out of a clinical depression. You cannot shame someone out of a crippling anxiety attack. What you can do, and what you absolutely must do, is something far more difficult, far more uncomfortable, and infinitely more powerful. You must learn how to step into the dark room, sit down on the cold floor right next to them, and simply say, "I am here." You don't bring a flashlight to blind them. You don't drag them by the collar into the sunlight before their eyes have adjusted. You sit in the agonizing silence with them. You validate the overwhelming terror of their reality without trying to instantly slap a silver lining on it. True empathy is not offering a solution. It is bearing witness to the pain. It is looking a shattered human being in the eyes and letting them know that their brokenness does not terrify you, that they do not have to perform, and that their mere existence, even in this paralyzed state, is completely and entirely enough. We must also radically redefine our concept of strength. For generations, we have been fed the Hollywood illusion that strength looks like invulnerability, that the strong man is the one who never cries, who never breaks, who marches stoically through the fire without a single flinch. That is not strength, that is an emotional lobotomy. True, raw, unfiltered strength is waking up with a mind that is actively screaming at you to give up, a brain that is flooding your veins with the heavy lead of despair and choosing to take a breath anyway. True strength is standing in the middle of that freezing ocean, exhausted, choking on the salt water of your own panic, and refusing to sink for just one more minute. If you are listening to my voice right now and you are trapped in that dark room, hear me very clearly. You are not lazy. You are not broken beyond repair. You are fighting an invisible, brutal war that the rest of the world cannot see, and the fact that you are still here makes you a survivor of the highest order. Do not apologize for the days you cannot get out of bed. Do not let a profoundly ignorant society dictate your worth. Your fight is real, your pain is valid, and you do not have to fight it in the shadows anymore. It is time we tear down the walls of this invisible darkness, hold each other accountable to a higher standard of radical empathy, and finally recognize that sometimes the absolute greatest victory a human being can achieve is simply staying alive to see tomorrow. Peach and Katie. In the end, the battle against mental illness is not a mere test of willpower. It is a grueling biological war fought in the invisible trenches of the human mind. We must violently reject the toxic narratives of hustle culture and the shallow wellness industry that falsely equates psychological suffering with weakness or a lack of effort. When society demands relentless productivity and dismisses chemical imbalances as bad mindsets, we do not cure the afflicted. We shame them into deep isolation, suffocating profound relationships in the process. The ultimate realization is that surviving a mind that is actively trying to destroy itself is the highest form of human resilience. We are desperately in need of a cultural reset, one that completely severs the twisted tie between our economic output and our intrinsic human worth. To genuinely save lives, we must abandon our arrogant desire to fix people with unsolicited advice, life coaching, and motivational platitudes. Instead, we must practice radical empathy by stepping into the darkness with those who are suffering, sitting beside them on the cold floor, and offering our unwavering, unconditional presence. You do not need to be flawlessly productive to be valuable. Your existence alone is entirely enough. By redefining strength as the quiet, monumental act of choosing to stay alive and try again tomorrow, we can finally begin to heal. True empathy requires surrendering the ego's relentless need to fix people. Mental illness is a physical crisis of the brain, not a character flaw, and a human being's worth is entirely independent of their economic productivity or ability to function within a hypercapitalist system. True strength is not invulnerability. It is sheer endurance in the face of an invisible biological storm. For yourself, if you are struggling, immediately stop measuring your daily self-worth by your output or your to-do list. Give yourself the radical grace to rest without guilt, recognizing that simply surviving a devastating mental health day is a monumental achievement. For others, when a loved one is battling depression or anxiety, stop offering unsolicited advice, toxic positivity, or quick fixes. Practice radical presence. Simply tell them, "I am here with you," and you do not have to pretend to be okay. Sit in the uncomfortable silence with them and let them know their pain does not make them a burden. What is one small way you practice self-compassion on the days when you feel completely overwhelmed or exhausted? Please kindly share your thoughts and experiences in the comments section below so we can all learn from each other's perspectives and build a genuinely supportive community. If you found value in this message, please hit that subscribe button to support the channel. Your subscription gives us the motivation to keep creating deep, meaningful content for you in the future.